Hi, Chloe. Welcome to the Integrative Health Coach Success Podcast.
Hi, Julia. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, yes, I'm really excited. And before we started recording, I kind of checked to make sure that we could share a little bit about how we met, which I'm so glad I'm going to. You were a mom of a son on my son's hockey team. So our sons play hockey together. And I'll never forget, my husband came home and he's like, "You're never going to believe it. One of the boys on Charlie's team, his mom's an IHP." And I was like, really? I'd never meet anybody in locally, right? That's an IHP. And we got to chat and I found out what you did and I couldn't wait to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you so much. No, Brian and I were both very excited when we figured out the connection. And anyways, I'm so grateful to be here.
Yes. Yeah. Can't wait for our chat. You're doing something really unique and incredibly special. But would you share with our listeners a little bit about what you're currently doing with your IHP certification? And then if you want to share with us kind of how you found IHP and maybe what you were doing before that, if it was something different, you can.
Absolutely. So currently I'm a registered dietitian. I've been a registered dietitian for 11 years now. And I am currently working with the Boston Fire Department as the clinical director of their in-house wellness program, Health and Ladders, which is something that I was brought on board a few years ago to help start. And then the other hat I wear is I own my own private practice right outside Boston. And I've been seeing my personal clients for years and kind of seeing everyone from little babies to the elderly. And maybe about 8 years ago, I started seeing firefighters. My husband, Kyle's a firefighter. And so some of his friends started seeing me and their friends. And then I really started working with this group more exclusively. And so that's kind of led me to where I am today. And oh gosh, how many years ago did I get my IHP certification? It's a really good question and one I probably should have known coming in here, but I would say maybe roughly 7 years ago. It was pre-pandemic. And, I came into my IHP certification being a registered dietitian, but one thing that as dietitians, we go to school forever. We get taught in hospitals and fantastic facilities, medical institutions. But we don't get taught about functional medicine. And so if that is an interest, and there's a bunch of dietitians who, have their opinions and don't buy into it, don't support it, I'll say. I always have. I think personally, I've always been really interested in all aspects of nutrition and how they connect and how they relate. I've, been reading Ayurvedic medicine and principles for years. And so a fellow dietitian of mine had told me, "Hey, have you heard of Dr. Cabral?" And I said, "No." And she said, "He lines up exactly with everything you," and I remember I listened to one of his podcasts, I read something, and the first thing he had talked about was his holistic dentist in Boston. I was like, I go to the same one. And so I instantly felt like, all right, these are my people. This is my home. And, again, as dietitians, we have to have continuing ed hours. Mm-hmm. And they're very selective on what counts, what doesn't. And a lot of integrative stuff doesn't. This wasn't one that did. So this was a commitment that I was like, you know what? This is something I believe in. I see the value in, and I want to learn more about it from a medical professional in a community that really knows this stuff. And so that's kind of how I fell into it and where I am today. But my practice, so much of my practice is based on these principles. So it's still very much front of mind.
Yes. Yeah. And I love that because we have so many nurse practitioners, dietitians, pharmacists, but even doctors, right, that take take the IHP course because it like doesn't have to be black and white. There's so much of conventional that's true, right? Or things that are life-saving or that are really important to know. And then there's the other side, right? That's more functional minded. And like blending it all is like really where people are served best because everybody's an individual. Everybody needs a little bit of something. And having that like vast knowledge, regardless of, what fits into previous schooling can be so helpful.
Absolutely. And we all, as practitioners, no matter where we are and what field we're in, need to step back and look at the big picture and realize that, healthcare isn't siloed into a bunch of these, there has to be someone looking at a comprehensive overview of our health.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. Okay. So I know you work with, maybe other people than just first responders, but what I would love to do today is chat about kind of how you got into, we talk about niching down, right? And the niche.
Yes.
How you got into supporting and serving first responders, specifically firefighters, right? It sounds like Boston Fire saw the value in providing their guys with significant health support. And that was when you kind of entered the picture. So tell us a little bit about what that looks like, what made you get into that, and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. So it started with firefighters, my husband's friends just walking through my door at the time. Now I'm all on Zoom, but back then when I was in an office, they would walk through my door. And I just started word of mouth. And I remember Boston Fire, I think in 2017, invited me to speak at a health symposium that they were having. Which I was really excited about because it was the first time that I had ever spoken in front of a group of firefighters. I had kind of only to that point worked with them individually. Mm-hmm. And I got up and talked to them about things that they loved. Like I talked to them about their daily pooping habits. And they were like, this is amazing. Nobody's talking about this. And I was talking to them about their sleep and the importance of napping sometimes and they were like, oh my God. So they were it was so fun and so motivating. But one of the things, one of the last slides I presented on was because I've always been really fascinated. I grew up with an environmentalist dad, and I've always been fascinated with environmental toxins and very cognizant and aware of them. Probably down more of a rabbit hole than I should be with a lot of this stuff, but it's always front of mind. And so, with Kyle, my husband, with fire, it's a profession that he loves. It's one of the best jobs on the planet, but it's always been a huge concern of, okay, but you're also exposed to these awful carcinogens, and rates in cancer and fire services is just increasing exponentially. What are we doing? Nutrition, lifestyle support, we can control some of this stuff. We can't control what you breathe in, but we can control the rest of your actions. So let's really focus on controlling what you can control. So one of the last slides I put up at this presentation was how to help your body detox after fires. And it was things like, all right, increase cruciferous vegetables, because we know that those are really helpful for our glutathione production, which helps our liver convert toxins to being water soluble so they can be excreted. Okay, we know drinking a lot of water is really important for our detoxification pathways. We know that sweating, we know that avoiding alcohol, the biggest toxin right after a fire. So I just kind of had this teeny little laundry list of things firefighters could be doing. And that was the most well-received. And I felt like that was definitely a pivotal moment in niching down, because it was certainly what I was most passionate about, but I didn't really know if other people would be. But a captain on FDNY who was in the audience approached me after, and he said, hey, no one's talking about this. No one's talking about what we can do after fires to help ourselves. We're talking about, making sure we're washing our gear, but we're not talking about what we're putting in our body and the lifestyle changes we can make. So he invited me to come down to FDNY, and I worked with them for a little bit. And then just from there, it kind of took off. And so I work with firefighters. A lot of firefighters deal with overweight and obesity. They deal with blood sugar issues and metabolic disorders. But kind of at the core and at everything I do also revolves around mitigating your risks as much as possible and helping your body constantly support its own natural detoxification system so that your body's as ready as it can be when it's facing these awful exposures.
Yeah. Yeah. And like these are like some of the most important jobs in our community, right?
Yes.
And to think that like nobody has paid the attention that frankly they all deserve, right? Whether it's fire, police, first responders of any kind, that like their health isn't a huge priority is crazy, right? And like, I even think, yes, fires and carcinogens and toxins, but when you said obesity and blood sugar, like we also underestimate the stress that their bodies are under, and they're going to far more things than just fires, right? They're potentially seeing traumatic things if they're going to, scenes of crimes or, deaths or they're at other things than just fires, and supporting them, whether it just be with deficiencies, but like you said, even the toxicities, it is, I think, such amazing and needed work. And like so crazy that it's been overlooked for so long.
And you hit the nail on the head 100% with stress too. Like that is such an underappreciated component of the job. And yes, there's of course the physical stressors of, going into a burning building and using all your resources there. The emotional stressors of seeing the worst of the worst calls that they all go on. But then there are other stressors, like they have to eat really quickly and shovel food in their mouths. That stresses your body out, right? A lot of them are eating in the middle of the night, which they shouldn't be when they get back from runs. But like our bodies aren't meant to be eating in the middle of the night. So that's going to stress their body out. Yeah. Something like 1 in 2 firefighters suffers from severe digestive issues. That stresses your body out. So they have so many other stressors. But, I really do want them to also pay attention to, the stressors that they can control, like slow down your eating, chew your food more, anyways, I know I'm preaching to the choir with you here, but it's a lot.
Yes. And if you think about it, like it takes a certain individual to be like, you know what I'm going to do? I am going to sign up to fight fires and keep the community safe, right?
Yes.
Like, that's a really good, selfless person. And
yes,
taking care of somebody like that who's taking care of others is, I think, like pivotal. But I also think that like much like IHPs, right, it takes an empathic person to want to even go down some sort of a first responder type of pathway. And empaths tend to, hold on to stress, internalize it differently. And so like supporting that, like you said, I love like just helping them with things that they can control, right? There's a lot that's out of their control, whether they're working nights or not sleeping great or right, what they are exposed to, but giving them the power to control what they can is such an important part of probably what you're doing.
Absolutely. And, and I tell everyone that I work with, like, look, we're going to talk about food last because of everything we're talking about. That's actually the least important. Like if somebody's coming to me for weight loss, oftentimes there's a laundry list of other issues going on that they didn't even pay attention to, like energy levels. Number one, I always tell people that's my number one metric of success is if we can get your energy levels good, we're golden. Digestive issues. How many guys have, and women, but primarily guys have acid reflux and they're, avoiding all of these foods. I'm like, let's not even pay attention to the foods. Like, are you drinking so many liquids with meals? Because that'll do it aside from the stress. But it's just like a lot of little lifestyle changes and habits that we work on before we even get to the food.
Yes. Yeah. Because there's so many layers that foundationally that even come before the eating. And the truth is it is a more male dominant, career, right? Yeah. I think all first responders, yes, there's women, but it certainly is more male dominated. And they're kind of just used to like putting their heads down, like just doing the thing, right? And they're not as in tuned with, I can't tell you how many guys I'm like, oh, how do you feel? And they're like, fine. And I have labs in front of me and I'm like, there's no way, but I'm going to tread lightly here. Yeah. And I'll like ask one by one. I'm like, so do you wake up feeling rested? Well, no, not really. I would rather go back to bed. Like, do you sleep well? Well, no, not really. Like, and I'm like, okay, so you're not feeling that great.
Yes, absolutely.
You're just like a little more out of touch. And it takes like that nudge to get them to go, oh, okay. All right. I'm listening.
Yeah. And to also connect the dots too. I mean, one thing that's worked, over the years, because again, people often come to me when something's wrong,
Yeah.
so it's like they've been told by their doctor or someone else that they have to lose weight, or maybe they want to. And they're like, all right, give me a meal plan, give me macros. And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Before we do that, like you're essentially coming to me right now telling me you have this shiny, amazing race car and you want to go 100 miles an hour. But if we're looking at the road ahead of you, there are potholes everywhere. So if I let you do that right now, you're going to ding up your car and hurt yourself. Like we have to fill the potholes. And so like we have to take care of your sleep. We have to take care of your digestion and your energy and your stress. And then weight loss really oftentimes, I don't know if you experience this in your practice, but so much of it, I see weight loss as kind of a symptom of something else. So when you fix everything else, the weight often comes off on its own.
Yeah. Yeah. Just comes, with like that de-stress protocol of
Yes.
lowering stress, working on just the foundations. I think as a society, we've been conditioned to think like it has to have something to do with the food I'm eating and something to do with me not exercising. And while, yes, those two are important, when it comes to real, like true wellness, there's a difference between just losing weight and being healthy. For true wellness,
great distinction.
Yeah, there's so much more that comes into play. And for men, there's so many ways for them to quickly lose weight. I mean, when
oh my gosh, easiest population in the world. Weight loss.
But are they doing it in a way that,
right.
like you said, is going to be long lasting or that's best for them? That's a different story.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said.
Yeah, I remember my dad years ago, he did the Atkins diet and was just always a big guy. He was just like your typical kapha, like sweet as can be, tall. And he did the Atkins diet and he was like unrecognizable. And then I want to say, I feel like it was shortly after that like Dr. Atkins passed away. And my mom was like, let's do something else.
Let's incorporate vegetables.
Yeah, exactly. But it's very easy to get somebody to lose weight, but to get them healthy takes a really, good look at things. And oftentimes stuff that's harder to fix than even just food. I find that sometimes when clients are like, just tell me what to eat, like they're kind of ignoring the things that are harder to change. Like, how are you internalizing your stress, right? Are you sleeping good? All of the like not so glamorous stuff.
Oh yeah. Habits are so hard to change.
Yes. Yep. Exactly. What do you find is like, do you get like resistance in one area the most? Like if you had to think, like if you had to pick like, okay, this is like a really hard thing for me to get them to like buy into or to change or to adopt, like, is there something, one like piece that's...
Julie, I got a few. I would say the one thing that they're not as resistant to, but they don't immediately understand as much is when I say, please don't eat in the middle of the night when you get back from calls. But as soon as I start to explain about our circadian rhythm and how our bodies are designed to be eating, all hours in the night, that clicks for them. But that's one that doesn't that one takes some effort, but then we get there. Yep. I think caffeine is a tough one because, obviously we don't want to use it as a Band-Aid. However, their profession demands that they are alert and focused. And so kind of giving them that fine line of, okay, so up to 400 milligrams a day of caffeine is safe and some types are better than other, but beyond that isn't good. And no energy drinks aren't good for you, and kind of helping them figure out how to decrease their caffeine intake, because oftentimes it's a lot higher than the safe limits, and to get it from sources that may be giving them a little bit more benefits. But I would say the number one thing, hands down, is alcohol. And alcohol, and I could say this with any client, it doesn't have to be firefighter specific, but in fire services, the culture is very much, it's shifting, but it is historically a drinking culture. Like after funerals, you drink. After big fires, you drink. You go out with buddies, you drink. And it's also, alcohol as a society is forever been kind of like almost like a stress reliever. Like, oh, it's how I unwind. It's how I do this. And when you have these really high stress jobs, whether it's police, fire, military, whatever, you're looking for those mechanisms to help you unwind. But I mean, you've seen the research, you've seen everything. Like, alcohol is just not good for you. And we have to, as health practitioners, change the narrative that, oh yeah, like a little bit's fine. There's just every day, it seems like a new study's coming out that's like, no, a little bit isn't fine. And obviously, drink, that's fine once in a while if that's what you want to do, but you have to be aware of the health risks. And so that's been a big source of pushback. And I don't ever mean to be mean or hypocritical or anything like that. But, it's kind of like when smoking years ago, we finally said, no, this is bad for you. And of course, there are going to be people who still choose to smoke, maybe less, and maybe now they're more aware, but it's not a health food anymore. So.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, when like the education piece around like, look, you're already dealing with a high toxic load based on your profession, and like getting them to understand that like your liver may be more overburdened than somebody else who isn't, and at least cutting it down. Yes, cutting it out, but your body may be less able to get rid of it because it's dealing with a whole bunch of other toxins too, right? And like the education piece, I imagine, is like important for them to like understand this is why, right? It's not like you're just like alcohol's bad. But for them, and I often find that usually people who drink a lot of caffeine tend to like want or need the alcohol at the end of the day. And it's like, well, yeah, because you just like shot yourself way up and now you need something to bring yourself down. And I find oftentimes that by like lowering caffeine, like, and this is even true with women, like that mommy culture of like drink tons of caffeine to get you through the day and then like your glass of wine to bring you down at night. I find that if I even lessen the caffeine, the desire for the alcohol lessens because they're not like ready to jump out of their skin.
That makes perfect sense. It's so interesting. That's really interesting.
But I was thinking you were going to say caffeine. I thought you were going to say sleep, but they can sleep in the firehouse, like if there's no calls and whatnot.
Absolutely.
That one can be tricky too. I think with any profession, even nurses, right? Anybody that's working nights, it's tricky on the circadian rhythm.
100%.
Yeah, to balance it all. Okay. And my other question is like, so when you're kind of working at this more macro level, so like working with a whole department, is it one of those things where the program, because I'm like picturing, is it super like are people really enthusiastic about it? And I like ask because like I love to gauge where like not Gen Pop, like, but like the general population tends to be with health and wellness. Are like, what would you say your like percentage split is of people that are super enthusiastic and people that are like, I don't want to meet with Chloe?
That's so interesting. So there's 1,600 members of the Boston Fire Department, and I'm available to all of them and all of their spouses. I think I used to, when I first was brought on, because I think people were so excited that they had someone. And so oftentimes, some of the members who were overweight would get like encouraged to go see me by their peers, whether, firefighters love to tease each other. So some of them would tease them or, but the problem with that is like, I start to become the food police, which I never. And I'm not, that's not who I am. Like I really, so it's taken me a little while, but by the time people come to me, because it's voluntary, nobody has to come see me. And I think that makes all the difference. So generally speaking, everyone that comes to me really wants to see me. And, there's such a, I feel like culture shift as a whole, like not just firefighter specific, but in this country, and that, with all of the information that's available to everyone out there, like social media and just at our fingertips, I think as a country, we're becoming a lot more health conscious and health aware. And so I'm pretty blessed because I feel like everyone who I see is excited to be there. And I also think sometimes too, having the support of their spouses can be really good. Because it depends who's doing the grocery shopping or who's handling that. But, I feel very fortunate that everyone is pretty eager. But again, it's voluntary. I think if this were mandatory, it would be a much different conversation.
Yes, yeah, of course. And to your point, I'm sure like why this is such a passion for you is because you had a spouse who
Yes.
was dealing with all of this. And I can imagine that there's probably some wives that while they're not like the picture of health themselves, want like their husbands to get some sort of support because they are in a profession that, kind of puts them behind the eight ball a little bit. And I can imagine the appreciation is really high from them.
Absolutely. And the fire, and I don't mean to just say fire wives community, but I should say fire partner community, is really, really supportive. And it's interesting. I just, after these awful fires out in California over the past few weeks, had put out on Instagram, how to help your firefighter detox from fires, like recipes you can make for them to support their natural detoxification pathways. And they were really high in like garlic and, cruciferous vegetables and healthy fat, just kind of all of those really good foods. But the response I got from that exceeded anything I've ever put. And I'm not good at social media. But the response from that exceeded anything I've ever done. And story after story of fire spouses and partners that were like, my significant other is in this fire right now. I haven't seen them in days. I've been looking for something to do for them. Like they just want to nurture them and they want to support them. And they're like, even if I can just make them some of these recipes or anything like that. So you're absolutely right. Like there is a community of people at home on the other side of this who are really looking for how they can best support their partner.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's so valuable. And one of the next things I was going to bring up was something had come up in my schedule. Our original recording date didn't work. And that was before these fires out in California. And I was kind of joking before we started recording that I think the timing of this was perfect because the truth is just any regular human being, right, could use environmental toxin-based detoxification support at any given time. But I mean, anybody living out west right now is, if you're being exposed to these carcinogens, anything that's in the air, right? I was thinking like even just like so many of these older homes and like, do they have lead paint? And like that's being, set on fire and set into the air. I mean, and I think we all think like we need to smell it or see it to be being exposed to it. But unfortunately, I don't think that that's the case. And how so much of even what you're talking about can be incredibly beneficial for people that are unfortunately in these areas.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think and it's interesting because, at first I've really been focusing on firefighters, but these fires out in LA have really showed me that a lot more people can benefit from paying attention to certain components of their health and making sure that they're getting certain nutrients and stuff like that.
Yes. Yeah. And just simply supporting detoxification. I mean, I think, unfortunately, the world that we live in is only getting more toxic. I hope that maybe there's a little bit of a shift, but it's just, I mean, it's inevitable, right? That we're just exposed to so much, and at least controlling what we can and supporting our detoxification pathways and being mindful of the things that we can eliminate. I mean, this is what I talk to my kids about all the time when they're like, well, I just want Gatorade. And I'm like, I know, but like diet's pointless to put in your body. So there's no reason to, have that when you could have this. And yeah, mom's going to let you eat like cupcakes at the birthday party, but like we're going to control like the real terrible stuff that you don't need that serves zero purpose in your body.
I have to tell you, Julia. So yesterday was such a like gratifying nutrition nerd mom moment when the FDA banned red dye number 3, because my kids have heard me lecture on the harmfulness of food dyes for years, and they totally tuned me out. I was like, guys, want to know what happened yesterday? And here's why. Mom was right. So there's very few moments where you can proudly proclaim that you victory over something. So this was a great one.
I know. And they can see it like happening on a national level. I know my daughter was like, I believed you, but like my son was actually like, wow, really? And I'm like, yes, I'm not just being like a nagging, annoying mom, because like
Yes.
diet is the one hill I'll die on. Like it's like
Yes.
gluten, dairy, like eat your cupcake, have a piece of pizza, you're a kid.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I control what I control in my house, but like there's just zero point of having a Gatorade with dye in it. It's like not going to help your brain. It's not going to help your body. Like just no.
Yeah.
And part of me is like, if you just took, it's not good for anybody. So just get it off the shelves. So these kids stop, like it's, yeah.
And if the FDA finally banned it, you know it's bad.
Yeah, exactly.
It takes a while to get to that point. So
Exactly. I did the same thing. That's so funny. Yep. Guess what?
mom victories.
Exactly. Okay. If people are listening and they have a spouse or a friend or a loved one that's a first responder, firefighter, and they want to kind of connect with you further or find out more, where are all the places that you show up, social media, websites?
Yeah, absolutely. So Healthy Response. So Instagram at Healthy Response. That's me. My website is myhealthyresponse.com. My Facebook got hacked, so I think I'm off that forever, but and then good old fashioned email, Chloe at myhealthyresponse.com.
That's great. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Integrative Health Coach Success podcast. This was such a fun episode for me, and I think such a beautiful, important thing that you're doing in the world. So thank you so much for taking care of the people that take care of us.
Thank you so much for having me, Julia. I really appreciate it.
Our pleasure. Talk soon, Chloe.
Okay, bye.